Welcome back to Jolie's, where you can get yourself some spicy sausage, roasted nuts, and the freshest React content on the tube. YouTube, that is. And today we are finally getting into a long requested series, or the beginning of a series that's been long requested, I should say. The series being DJ Peach Cobbler. We all know him. We all love him. You folks have inspired me to really follow along with this man's career. And this is going to be my first installment covering the first video of the fall of the Aztecs. So we're about to get into that. But before we do, of course, you know, you've been on YouTube before. Please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to this channel, and share this video with someone who might also be interested in the fall of the Aztecs. You know, let's get some on the ground historical context from a book. So it's like secondhand, history here. That's pretty good. Secondly, I think this is more relevant than ever. I have created a game called X Seekers of Fortune. You know, it's a traveling or adventure strategy card game, but the thing that I think is important and somewhat relevant to the video we're about to watch is this game, not specifically this set, but the expansion that we're going to be coming out with, hopefully by next year, will be heavily inspired by the New World and the colonization of the New World. So I feel like in watching DJ's video here, I'm going to be getting a lot of education and background I need to make an even better the art and theme of my game even better as we move into those topics. And then I think there was a third thing I'd like to go over. Well, of course, if you haven't seen this video before, there's a link in the description if you want to watch it without my commentary. And oh yes, I have also started putting out videos that are not just straight React videos, but are more me talking about my thoughts and feelings from the cuff on things. I started by doing a trailer review of the Intergalactic The Heretic Prophet, which is the Naughty Dog game that they announced at the Game Awards at the end of 2024. And in that video, I basically identify what I think is the actual main problem beyond the character's appearance. I would love to get some feedback on that. Please drop a comment on that one if you go out of your way to watch it. In fact, I'll link that one below as well because I'm very proud of it, and that's the direction I want to take this channel moving forward. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get into DJ Peach Cobbler's The Fall of the Aztecs, Part 1. Oh, and quick warning in case you don't know, this is an hour and 21-minute video without my commentary. So I guess we'll see how long I can yap for. All right, folks, we're getting into it in 3, 2, 1, boop.
Hey guys, before we get started, I just want to say, I'm not like those other history YouTubers. I'm cool and edgy because I say the fuck word and kill stray cats. But of course, this isn't my story. This is the story of Geronimo de Aguilar. Aguilar was a Spanish missionary in Panama during the 1510s before being sent to the colony of Santo Domingo for a court case. Unfortunately for him, the ship he was on struck a sandbar off the coast of the Yucatan. The 12 survivors of the shipwreck, including Aguilar, as well as a man named Gonzalo Guerrero, were then captured by a Mayan tribe and set to be sacrificed. God, in his great mercy, however, gave the two men a chance to escape. Then, God looked away for a second and checked his Robin Hood portfolio, so they got captured by another Mayan tribe.
Oh my goodness. Well, I mean, where are you going to go if you're shipwrecked? I mean, without a ship, you're just on the same island. You're going to just run into more tribes people, even if you escape. I guess you could just hope that these folks are a little bit more, understanding of your situation. But yeah, being shipwrecked in that era, that probably has to be one of the scariest things. If you want to understand how scary a shipwreck is, there's a great episode of, I believe it's the last podcast on the left, did an episode on the USS Indianapolis, I want to say it is, the one that delivered the bomb. If you remember Jaws, the great speech that I think it's Hooper makes, about his, about the doll's eyes of the shark. Go and listen to that episode of Last Podcast on the Left, because even more than the sharks, the depravity that happens when especially human men, I guess, are looking down the barrel of death, it turns into a very chaotic orgy of like violence and rape. And you can only imagine, I think they make the point that in that episode of Last Podcast on the Left, this is one of the few documented cases of a ship being wrecked at sea and the people being saved, like, not after a few days. Imagine how many times throughout history a ship has gone down in the middle of the sea. There will be survivors adrift who, are trying to hold on for dear life, and, just that slow death that they went through. So these guys are just lucky they ended up on an island. I mean, I would take execution over, well, assuming it's just a standard, like they bash my skull in, not some sort of like, laying out my entrails. Anyways, let's see what happens to this guy, because he's shit out of luck, but I guess he lived long enough to write about it.
Then life happened. Aguilar and Guerrero, while slaves of the tribe, were still in many ways a part of the tribe. Guerrero married a wealthy local woman. They had children, and hell, he even became a war chief. But Aguilar never stopped being a Spaniard. He would never forsake Christ, nor his country. Days
based
turned into weeks, weeks into months, months into years, years into nearly a decade, until you were the Spaniard. Yes, that's racist, but yes. Many more of you have come in the big floating houses filled with excrement and rats to the island they call Cozumel. They've asked to buy you from your master. Well, lop off my dick skin and call me a Jew. Are you serious? Okay, that is actually racist. Anyway, I've brought a message and beads to purchase you if you wish to return. What is it with you people and beads? What is it with you people and the shiny yellow metal and the dead guy on the stick? Just let people enjoy things, okay?
Culture is weird, isn't it, folks? Like what we put our most our value into, and what on paper is so invaluable, but in our hearts and our souls is valuable. Now, granted, I mean, a lot of societies found gold to be valuable. It was kind of like an agreed upon thing to sort of like set a currency, that maybe didn't quite make it in the Americas, or the Americas didn't see the same value in gold because of reasons, I'm sure. Anyways, I'm sure we're going to get more into that, but yeah, just be, if somebody holds something in their heart, you might as well respect that. I mean, it's respectable to value something higher than it's worth to others. At least I believe so. I mean, granted, there's a dark side to that too. There's a dark side to everything. That's one of the themes of this channel. But, when in doubt, just respect people for what they respect. Respect what people respect.
Oh, just give me the fucking letter. Gentlemen and brothers, here in Cozumel, I have heard that you are captives in the hands of a Mayan chief.
Oh.
I beg you to come to this place at once, and for this purpose have sent a ship with soldiers in case you need them. Also a ransom to be given to those Indians with whom you are living. The ship will wait for you 8 days. Come as quickly as you can, and you will be welcomed and looked after by me. Can you bring an Xbox 360 controller, by the way? I'm trying to convert the natives and have been using Minecraft Night to teach them about Jesus. Anyway, 8 days, beads, quite possibly your only chance at freedom ever.
It's ironic he says that I did using Minecraft to teach people about Jesus, because there's a channel that I was following called Redeemed Zoomer for a little bit. Just, he did deep dives into all the different sects of Christianity and like what they believe and what makes them different, which I found very helpful for my own understanding. And he used Minecraft. I mean, I think he had a Christian Minecraft server, essentially, where they built cathedrals. Beautiful things. Wonderful use of Minecraft, but just funny.
Get it. Smell you later. Hernan Cortez. Holy shit.
He's going to be smelling them. There's no way these guys smell good. Well, maybe there's a way, but, they're not going to smell good to Hernandez Cortez when they get there.
I have all those beads. Why do you need these beads? I leave the beads with your master, you come with me, you go on the big floating house filled with 8 million rats and 0 women. Don't you people like this sort of thing? I would go with you, but another Spaniard, one I've known for years, he's many days' travel from here, but I must bring him with me. And so, Aguilar traveled to Guerrero, and found that the trip was for nothing. Why won't you return with me? Dude, quiet down. My wife is right in the other room, and she already doesn't like me hanging out with you. You would so easily forsake your Lord and Savior.
Some things are beyond culture. Women not liking their man's friends, their man's friends that they had before, in the before times, before they met them. It seems like a tale of as old as time.
You wish to live here in the jungle, drinking blood and worshipping demons. All right, you clearly underestimate how fun those two things are.
Yeah,
even
that
if
is
they
pretty
weren't,
fun.
Look at my fucking face, dude. I look like a roadie for Motley Crue that lived 10 years longer than I expected to. I've got several beautiful children.
Gosh. Living the hard life, the fast life, and then finding out that your genetics say that you're going to live to 70 or 80 no matter what you do. Oh, that's got to be rough. Decisions that you made because you thought you would die before 35 that haunt you at 40.
A gorgeous and rich wife, a pretty sick gig as a war chief, and inexplicably, a mortgage somehow. I can't just leave. I know, we've lived here so long, I don't know if I can go back either, but I can't live here for another moment if... No, Aguilar, I lived here. You just were here.
Ooh.
And you should go home.
That was a bar.
Aguilar would return to Cortez's ships, only to find them gone.
No!
His one and only chance at freedom had left the island of Cozumel, and was now en route to... I'm pretty sure those things are supposed to go on top of the water.
Oh, okay, well, maybe lucky him.
I guess Jesus finally decided to throw Aguilar a favor, because one of Cortez's ships was taking on water, so the expedition had to return to the island of Cozumel for repairs, and Aguilar would get to be freed. Did you bring the controller? Yeah, but the only one I could find was one of those knockoff Mad Catz controllers. God.
F in the chats. You're not going to convert anybody with a Mad Catz controller. I think I would have gotten into the game Super Smash Bros. Melee years earlier if it wasn't for being handed those Mad Catz controllers whenever I played with friends.
Savages. Did you know they dig straight down, too? Oh, well. I'm just glad we managed to find you. Oh, you can imagine how I feel. I can't wait to return to my missionary work in Panama. Oh, yeah, that's great. I love helping people for free, and with absolutely nothing done for me in return.
Oh.
I'd be happy to help with whatever you need. But what is that exactly? What are you people doing here? We just need a translator. I assume you've learned the native tongue? Well, yeah, I've learned Yucatec, but a translator for what? A... project.
If that mythical moment, the birth of modern history, can be said to exist, it occurred on November 8th, 1519. Francis J. Brooks. That's scary. Cortez the Great and powerful. All right, folks, just a great cold open, great prologue to this entire story. He tells stories, DJ Peach Cobbler, like, he tells history the way that you would want to see it portrayed in a long-form TV show. That is exactly how I would want the TV show about colonization to start. That said, I'm kind of scared. Hold my hand, please. Let's go.
I'm sorry for the next 2 minutes. It has been said that the best sources are not unbiased. The best sources
Openly
are
biased.
open about their bias.
I try
It was
to be
me,
that.
I said that. This is what I want when I do one of these things.
DJ.
I want a clean narrative filled with drama, stakes, big ideas, and yes, funny and interesting facts, so you walk away having learned something for once. You
Sounds like a full
goddamn
meal.
animals. I have 0 credentials, save for a rare form of autism I contracted from licking car batteries. I couldn't afford to go to college, so I joined the Air Force. Then some weird YouTube stuff happened, so when my contract ended last April, I decided to do this for a living. Yes, thank you. My parents are very proud, and because they refused to co-sign on my student loans, their credit score is intact.
Win. Very, very good, very smart parents. They probably had an idea of what was about to happen, though. Did he get what is the scholarship that the GI Bill scholarship at all to help him with? I'm assuming that he's essentially confessing that he does not have a degree in history. So that's good to know. And yes, sorry, 100%. I agree with DJ here. Openly biased sources. state your biases. That's why I try to do, and whenever a new topic comes in here, because that's the thing I forget. I keep forgetting. I need to incorporate it, because we're all fence sitters here. You're a fence sitter just by watching me. That said, even a fence sitter has pretty strong opinions about things that, they might not be aware of, are strong opinions, so that you might as well state your opinions up front.
This is the perspective I bring. It's not a great one, but it's mine all the same. This whole project started with me reading a Wikipedia article about Aztec death whistles, which spurred me to investigate if there were any eyewitness accounts of their usage, and that led me to The Conquest of New Spain by Bernal Diaz. Bernal Diaz was a conquistador present on several expeditions, most importantly, Cortez's expedition, which would spell the end of the Aztec Empire. So I started reading it, and the narrative was incredible. It was thrilling, dramatic, fascinating, and emotional. It had heroes, villains, victims, strange alien peoples engaging in bizarre practices, and by the end of the book, I had the best video script I'd ever written. But something was wrong.
Oh.
Did I buy everything Diaz wrote? Well, of course not. I may have no credentials, but I've been around the block, and some of the shit didn't add up. And of course, Diaz had an agenda. I needed background, perspective, an expert's trained eye so as to properly iron out any outright lies Diaz recorded that I couldn't spot. So, that guy that's always going in all my videos and leaving super long-winded comments about the Aztecs? He pointed me towards the work of Professor Matthew Restall of...
Who the hell was that guy? I thought... I came into this video thinking that DJ is not... DJ Peach Cobbler is going to be the most, thorough... historian, not historian, amateur historian making a YouTube video, and he was spurred along by somebody else. That's the thing. You have to follow, the ideas that are given to you. There's this idea, this line that I thought would have been so much better in a Martin Scorsese film from a few years ago, or almost a decade ago. I think probably about a decade ago at this point, Hugo. And in that line, what is his name? Lumiere? It's not Lumiere, that's the brothers, but the filmmaker who did Journey to the Moon, the old silent films that were relied upon, editing tricks to sort of create a stage show that they could show on film. Beautiful work, great early movies. But there was a line that I thought, when I heard the line out of context, I thought it was so much better than in the movie, which is, "Look around, this is where dreams are made." And that's the way I feel about walking through life or interacting with people. It's like everything that comes in, all the sensories and stuff, that comes in from other people is what formulates the dreams that come out of your mind, whether they be your visions of what you could accomplish, or, just the dreams that you have at night that kind of, synthesize everything together and sort of make it into a tapestry. So, because in the movie, it was him referring to the movie sets that he had built, and in the movies he was producing, it was supposed to be oh, this is so, which it makes sense in the context of the movie. But I thought that line was such a good line that it was hampered by the execution. Or it was the kind of line that maybe should have been said twice. Once, about the extravagant set, and then another time about just the mundanity of life, and the connections of people to people, and ideas to ideas. The book you read will influence your dream. The person you talk to will influence your dream. The video, the commenter in your YouTube channel will influence the dream, and the dream being the life that you create.
Penn State University. And
Diaz billed his book as the true history of the conquest. In the New York Times and Chicago Sunday Tribune, reviewers of a modern edition of Diaz's True History called his words the most reliable narrative that exists, and the most complete and trustworthy of the chronicles of the conquest. But what if it is the opposite of that? Utterly unreliable, incomplete, and untrustworthy.
Okay.
Where does that leave us?
Give me just half a second. What the fuck?
God damn it! I had a nice, tidy little video.
But that was, but he said, "What if?" I mean, where is his proof? I mean, is it? Okay, I'm sure we're going to get into it, but I could say that about anything, really. What if you're toilet doesn't work the next time you flush it, what then? What are you going to do? I'm not a big fan of what if questions, like maybe at the silliest level, but they, just putting it out there like that. I mean, you need to come in with your factuals to contradict his counterfactuals or what have you.
About the fall of the Aztec Empire, and Matthew Restall, with his degrees and his sources and his facts and his logic, he destroyed it. It was the best thing I'd ever written, and I had to watch him dismantle it, page by page.
Okay, so I guess he did.
In slow motion.
He did justify it.
Ruthless efficiency. But then something funny happened.
Sorry, I'm just so paranoid about not recording. Okay.
Yeah, something even funnier than my crippling despair and self-doubt. Where once I had a smooth and inoffensive narrative, I now had a web of Spanish laws and Aztec cultural norms and Tintin comics for some reason, and an endless succession of increasingly incorrect maps. Buy these books, if only so you can see the fucking bibliography. It was insane. It was destructive. It was equal parts inspiring and infuriating. How can I tell you the story of the fall of the Aztec Empire if that story is still being written? How can I depend on the words of Bernal Diaz at all if so much of it was an outright lie? Are the minor, more innocuous things he wrote accurate, and just a few key events are incorrect? Or is it just pure invention? The greatest lie ever sold on shelves, a lie bought and sold for century after century, convincing people, even to this very day. But how
That's a really good point about books in general. Is the most important thing a book is made for is not entertainment, in my opinion, though every book, anything you put a lot of time into that you actually want people to take things away from should have some level of levity and entertainment. That's just how it sticks in the mind. That's how you have a conversation through time. But books are meant, and don't believe what book talk tells you, because the book talk would have you believe that they're meant for your birdie to get all squirty. Books are meant to pass knowledge and truth from one generation to the next. Cortez's book here, I believe that's what his name was, or Diaz, I think it was. Diaz's book here obviously succeeded if he is still being written about by current historians who are looking to refute his text. Whether his book was factual, a load of malarkey, what have you, he obviously stood the test of time up until most recently. And even then, I have a feeling DJ Peach Cobbler, is still going to be influenced by what he said. I'm sure he's still going to be checking in. So, good on you, Diaz, for being a conquistador. I don't know if you were a man of words, but yeah, good on you for writing something so important that it's been read through 400 more years.
Worthy is Matthew Restall. Sure, he actually went to college. Sort of a lot. And I have found no compelling counter-arguments against the broader strokes of his work, but historians cannot get hard unless they're calling someone a fraud. It's just the way they are. He even went so far as to say the use of the term human sacrifice shouldn't be applied to the Aztecs. Instead, using the term ritualized execution, because those that were killed were usually actually prisoners of war.
Okay.
I don't get his point on this one, at all.
Yeah, that's semantics that annoy the hell out of me. I mean, if you want to use them interchangeably, but I think a ritualized execution is essentially a human sacrifice. Just, one leads to another. They're related. I'm all for clarifying that these human sacrifices were ritual executions. I mean, maybe from his perspective, a human sacrifice is it has to be like an innocent person plucked out. Like the lottery, the short story, The Lottery. Just somebody is chosen either randomly or by specific criteria and through no fault of their own executed. But I mean, if at the end of the day the person's executed for some sort of higher spiritual purpose, then I think that makes it a human sacrifice, no matter how they were attained.
That's just human sacrifice. Okay, I mean, hold on. Is this just a bunch of contrarian liberal garbage? The guy's a professor of women's studies, too. I mean, imagine that.
Boo.
Studying women. They be shopping.
Yeah.
Ain't nothing else to say on the matter.
Hell yeah,
And
brother.
Goddammit, listen. Okay, we all know modern academics have a sorta, oh, who's a special little baby disposition towards people of a certain amount of melanin and estrogen. In the pursuit of the truth, did Matthew Restall go too far? So far as to throw away basic common sense. Matthew Restall is arguing against centuries of accepted wisdom, but holy shit, that bibliography, the sources he used, the extent of it, the work is there. It's on full display, whether you agree with the conclusions or not. And sometimes I didn't. I wanted to present a clean narrative, the commonly accepted one. But the commonly accepted one is clearly incorrect in just about every way, if not bullshit from start to finish. As we go along, we will encounter what I will call knots. This is where the narrative splits and becomes contradictory, confusing, and contentious. These knots are
The command knot, the Cholula knot, the meeting knot, the capture knot, the death knot.
These are the parts of the story where
Okay.
there are many conflicting accounts. You know why? Because guess what? This entire event is steeped in political bullshit from the time. So, as we pull the different contradictory threads, you learn a lot more than you ever could have from a traditional narrative. You will learn about the lies of Spaniards,
This is going to be a really great series. I can already tell that. I do think that as long there's a lot to be said about my feelings towards history as, kind of like the idea like history is written by the victors versus like what actually happened. I would, good on this professor, for getting in and providing the nuances and actually going in and creating I'm going to presume, the academic, I don't want to say novelization. I'm just trying to make a comparison, an analogy. That's what I'm best at. That's what I'm put on this world for, one of the aspects. But it seems to me that Diaz wrote the, elevated popcorn, history of, from his singular perspective, and made sure to tie up, sand off the sides that were just, wouldn't make for good entertainment and good narrative, while still maintaining history. So I don't think we should condemn or dismiss. I mean, I think maybe using Diaz as a starting point and then, getting in under there, these two texts maybe should, from here on out, be published together as a volume. I don't know, but it's just, for me, sometimes you gotta sacrifice the truth for the story, the narrative, especially if you're just trying to appeal to the broader audiences. So I mean, you might disagree. If you disagree with me, if you think every story should hold itself slavishly to the truth that's reported, then let me know in the comments. But I've heard too many stories told that I lived through, and they were told better than what I remembered to be the truth, to think that you should be slavish to the truth when trying to entertain others.
historians and natives alike. And most importantly, what those lies were in service to. The lies in this story are lies we've told for centuries, and as such, are important lies that have shaped the world and the way we perceive it. This has been the most inspiring, complicated, and enriching project I've ever worked on. It has reinvigorated my love for my work, such as it is, and I hope that you will go on this journey with me. But if you do, you need to be here for the long haul. So let's make like Cortez, burn the boats, and get started.
You are aware that didn't actually happen, right?
Shut the fuck up! The expedition of Hernando
Yes,
Cortez set sail from
exactly.
Cuba towards the Mexican coast due to previous smaller expeditions finding significant amounts of gold.
All right, just to give us an update, we're 12 minutes into the 1 hour and 21 minute video. So talk about the long haul. And this is part 1.
A mix of friendly and hostile natives, as well as rumors of a rich kingdom further inland. Their was also a much more depressing reason that this expedition happened, but we'll save that for later.
Oh.
And that rich kingdom
Okay.
had heard of these expeditions as well, and tried to make contact with one of them, but by the time ambassadors had arrived, they'd already ran back to Cuba. So, here's the goal.
Mission objective. Get gold, then go home and party.
You may note that there's nothing
Easy
in there
peasy.
about conquering shit. This expedition did not have the power nor authority to establish colonies or wage large wars.
Okay.
It is important to remember that conquistadors were not soldiers, which is to say, salaried, trained, armed, and empowered by the government. They were investors, and any legal authority they had.
So we're talking about freaking Elon Musk over here? That's what Cortez was? Some like Wall Street finance bro? See, they have always been and always will be the true villains.
Needed to be authority granted by the crown. So that should be easy, right? When the expedition landed at Cozumel, that whole thing went off without a hitch. There was no gold, but, you know, it was peaceful, and those guys sure did learn to love Jesus. But once they
or
continued
else.
on to Mayan territory on the mainland, it turns out that something had happened between the last expedition, where these tribes were friendly, and Cortez's expedition. Have you seen your boyfriend again? The white man is not my boyfriend. Yeah, right, dork. When the Spaniards visited our village, we killed 56 of them. What did you do, huh? You traded. Like a woman. I did not. Yeah,
Ooh.
did too. I bet you don't even want to die covered in blood and feces during a massive battle with a technologically superior foe. I'll show you. I'll show you next time the white man comes. I suppose that shaking a weapon and waving your naked erection around is how these people say hello. Crewman, I demand you bring me my musket and my finest dick pump. Ah, Hernan Cortez, the great diplomat, they'll call me. A series of skirmishes occurred while the Spaniards landed on the beach and built camp in a Mayan territory they expected to be friendly. And it is thanks to the translations of Aguilar that the Spaniards learned it was going to get worse. One of their Indian captives had escaped, gone to the other side, and said, well, what you would expect, to the locals. So should we trust these white men? No! The entire region was now against Cortez, according to Diaz. I'd wager it might have been just one or two tribes, but regardless, in a decisive battle, further inland, now called the Battle of Sintla.
I mean, let's with how things escalate, even if it was only one or two tribes at the time, you have one or two tribes against you and you fight the tribes, then word spreads to other tribes. And if it's going to be brown man versus white man, and I'm a brown man, I'm going to team up with my other brown men. You know, it's like the idea of like a great invader. Like if we were invaded by aliens and they were hostile, every human would come together. Like that's always been like, you know, that's the spoiler alert potentially, but that's the reason for what happens in Watchmen. The seminal graphic novel by Alan Moore. What else is there to say? Maybe more. Maybe another video sometime. But suffice to say, it's going to the idea that if you start fighting these brown people, these brown men, the Aztecs, as well, Spaniards, it's going to be your team versus their team, and their team's going to start multiplying because they have reinforcements within days walk, and your reinforcements are months away by boat.
Here your Spanish swords and Cortez's massive, intimidating erection saved the day. Don't ask questions. As I said in my last video, Bernal Diaz wasn't a historian, so he has these weird sort of Diaz-isms. For example, during an earlier expedition, Diaz saw a bunch of evil-looking idols, and he wrote,
Others went so far as to affirm that they, the natives who worshipped and or carved the statues, were descendants of the Jews whom Titus and Vespasian had driven from Jerusalem, who had been shipwrecked off this coast.
Yeah, so I've actually read about and talked about Titus and Vespasian and the Second Jewish Rebellion quite a bit. I am not a historian, I'm a guy, once again, I read books about events, then I tell you what the books told me after applying as much critical thought as a YouTuber's brain is capable of. And then I pin a comment with all...
Don't let my pausing and commentary fool you. It's not much.
Books listed, and, you know, if you want to know more. Out of all the times and places of history, though, one in which I consider myself particularly knowledgeable is the Second Jewish War and the start of the Flavian dynasty. I've read easily over 1,000 pages on the subject and written dozens. And dude, I got no idea what the fuck Diaz is talking about. I'm not saying he's wrong. Obviously he's wrong. I'm saying the statement is so huge and out of place that it doesn't even feel like a statement. It's more like this weird version of Tourette's that he has. He just does that. He'll say the craziest shit you ever heard in your entire life, but it's always buried in the middle of super benign statements, like it's not a big deal. It's horrible. And this is what it's like reading it.
The people of the Cocoa Valley are fond of a local tree which bears a strange dark fruit that the cocoa people turn into a hot beverage, not dissimilar to coffee. The beverage is energizing and refreshing, and we enjoyed it often. This is, of course, much like the Baja Blast people who live on the Mountain of Dew and enjoy Baja Blast at their local Taco Bell. The Cocoa Valley contains many rocks of varying sizes. I touched one, it was hard. Attached are 57 rough sketches of the valley's many exciting rocks. Guard them with your life.
Anyway, Diaz said of the Indian reaction to seeing cavalry.
Oh, right, sorry. The Indians thought at that time that the horse and rider were one creature, for they had never seen a horse before.
Thanks, Diaz, that was very helpful. Regardless, after this battle, Cortez suspected the Indians may have considered the horses and cannons to be conscious. Diaz doesn't say why this is. I assume it's because Cortez has a really fine-tuned expert's grasp on racism. You understand? He was a professional. So Cortez arranged to meet with the Mayan leaders for peace talks after loading up a cannon, which was to be fired when he gave the signal, and ordering a stallion to be hitched to a post that had previously hitched a mare in heat. So, this is how the peace talks went. We apologize for our attack. And
is he trying to suggest I'll breed my stallion with your heated mare?
come bearing gifts. Well, I forgive you, but, well, my hands are sort of tied. What do you mean? The cannon is angry at you. Oh, no. What is wrong with the giant deer? He's angry with you, too. Why does it have such a large erection? He's really mad. I absolutely believe that Cortez believed. The natives believed that, but I wager they left the whole ordeal more confused than anything. Regardless, the Spanish and the Mayans learned to exist in peace forever and ever, don't worry about it, and Cortez even passed his charisma skill check. So he taught him some Jesus and tore down their old idols. I'd love to move on from here, but first, I want to tell you a story about a princess. This princess was born to a member of the Aztec nobility around the year 1500 and given the name Malinali, after the goddess of grass. Her father, unfortunately, died while she was young, and her mother married a new man and bore him a son. Her mother, wishing for the son to inherit everything, would sell her daughter into slavery, and even go so far as to have a sham funeral conducted. Malinali would be sold from place to place, learning both the Aztec language of Nahuatl and the Mayan language of Yucatec, until, in the year 1519, she found herself gifted to Cortez, among 19 other women, by the Yucatec Mayan leaders, as a peace offering. Cortez would take her as his sex slave and translator, and while Spanish priests would baptize her with the name of Marina, she has gone down in history as La Malinche. La Malinche is a complicated figure. She would give birth to Cortez's son Martin, one of the first mestizo children, which is to say, a child with both native and Spanish ancestry, so she's considered by some sort of a symbolic mother of the modern Mexican people, but her actions as translator for Cortez naturally gives her a reputation as a traitor. She would, years after the events of our—
Wow, there's so much tragedy so quickly. That's the thing about history, is like when you have the entire scope of somebody's life, you can really just knock people over with, like, you know, just the highlight reel of whether it be their accomplishments or just the you know, what turned them into the villains they might have become, you know, the tragedies. Oof.
Story be married off by Cortez to a conquistador, therefore losing her status as a slave. So, you could interpret her actions as throwing her people under the bus for personal gain, but, you know, she didn't gain much, she just gained her freedom. Sorta. Regardless, the translation chain that needed to exist for communications with the Nahua people, which is the ethnic group the Aztecs belonged to, was now established. La Malinche would translate Nahuatl to Yucatec, then Geronimo de Aguilar would translate Yucatec to Spanish. Bear in mind, despite my silly little pie people bullshit, that's how the Spanish are going to communicate from here forward. So it's fair to doubt significant portions of their account on that basis alone. You can see from Aztec illustrations how omnipresent she was during all of this.
Oh, wow.
She was vital. She was so omnipresent, in fact, that the Aztec tended to call Cortez Malinche as if they were both the same person. Mexican.
I mean, understandable. I mean, like, you know, they probably presented as a power couple at the time. Oh, sorry. Oh, wow. Ooh, okay. Sorry about that. Anyways, that is so fascinating, but it also goes to show something that I think, you know, bear in mind. It is, if you're in a position within a organization, a power hierarchy, if you will, you know, Cortez is obviously the pinnacle of this power hierarchy of the expedition, and you want to have sway and power yourself, you gotta get up next to that person. There's this role on film sets called script supervisor that is essentially like somebody who's there to make sure all the continuity is in check and, you know, did we say all the lines correctly? And it seems like a very innocuous position, but it is a position that has you right next to the director. The director is probably often turning to you asking, you know, was that good? What do you think? Blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden you are now basically their confidant. So just remember that. If you really want to rise or have more power than your station, find the position right that puts you right next to the person with the vision, the leader, that sort of thing. If you can't just become the leader yourself. I think Steve Jobs, like the movie Jobs, also showed how Steve Jobs is, I guess it was his personal assistant. Maybe there was something more to it, but she was always next to him, always help, you know, his sounding board for his ideas. She was always his moral, you know, at least in the way the movie shows it off, but she was there to be his moral compass, a sounding board, you know, somebody to play tennis, you know, mental tennis with, if you will. So, you know, don't let the job title fool you. Sometimes you get next, if you're in proximity to visionary, powerful people, you will have an influence over history.
Today have a term derived from her name, a fact which was thankfully brought to my attention by a cool dog on Discord. That term is malinchista. To call someone a malinchista is basically calling them a combination of an Uncle Tom and a Benedict Arnold. I am largely uninterested in remarking upon Mexican attitudes towards their complicated and bloody national history.
With the notable exception of this propaganda poster, this picture goes hard, for real.
Oh, yeah.
Feel free to screenshot.
But it seems that only in academic circles has La Malinche's image been rehabilitated, and her reputation remains among most outside the academic liberal arts circle jerk, the reputation of a traitor of the highest possible order, a traitor to both her people and her nation. La Malinche's thoughts have not survived the passage of time. While we have many letters from Cortez, legal documents, and the accounts of eyewitnesses such as Diaz, we do not know how La Malinche felt about any of this. In Mexican popular culture, La Malinche is often portrayed as enthusiastically helping the Spanish, as she was in love with Cortez. While that is possible, and she could harbor some resentment of her people for her treatment, this whole thing feels tantamount to accusing a Jew of supporting the Nazi war machine because, of course, many of them did. They were coerced into doing forced labor. Yeah. Oh yeah, a German official.
Yeah, it's like accusing a Jew of supporting the Nazi war machine because he likes Wagner, because he thinks Hitler was a decent artist, that sort of thing.
Was not real. They just used insane amounts of forced labor and were invading a largely demilitarized Europe. So yes, you can attribute what military successes the Nazis did accomplish to the superiority of the Jewish Übermensch. Oh, please, L'chaim. My delicate gay German wrists can't possibly build this railroad. Oh, whatever will I do? Have no fear, my genetically inferior friend. Stand aside, and I'll build as many railroads as it takes to... What is this for again? It's for transportation? Transportation to what? The matzo ball and dreidel factory? I do like those things. That's actually the way it happened. Stay woke. Anyway, I have a very character-centric method of discussing history. I like to consider the human, the forces and trends they're trapped within, and how they react to them. Scipio Aemilianus set the city of Carthage ablaze, only to look out at it and wonder how long it would be until Rome found the same fate. Smedley Butler finished his long and accomplished military career only to spend the rest of his life traveling the country, giving the same speech over and over. And it started with, "War is a racket. It always has been. It is possibly the oldest, easily the most profitable, surely the most vicious. It is the only one international in scope. It is the only one in which profits are reckoned in dollars and the losses in lives." I would like you...
If you want to learn more about that guy, he did another video that I've already reacted to on my channel. I believe it was called "The Time America Almost Had a Caesar." So definitely go and check that out. Or, as we should say, at the time that America almost had a Kaiser. But yeah, go and check that one out.
To bear in mind the words of based King Smedley Butler as we continue to discuss this oddly profitable, glorious conquest of savages. Regardless, it is that fear, that doubt, that guilt that changes them from names, symbols, heroes, or villains to people, trapped within the machine of civilization and being ground by the gears until they fit into place. Did La Malinche have a moment of doubt? Did she love Cortez, or only obey him? Perhaps she didn't know what he was capable of until it was far too late. While it is possible that she felt affection towards him in a sort of sad, sick way, Cortez did not love her. He was a famous womanizer, with his palace filled with sex slaves, and he only mentioned her twice in all his letters to Spain and only once by her actual name. Later, when Cortez's wife made her voyage to the New World, Cortez would get rid of Malinche, with aforementioned marriage arrangement. She was absolutely instrumental to the fall of the Aztec Empire. Without her, it probably wouldn't have happened. But just because that's the case doesn't mean she wanted it to happen. She was a tool, used for that, and tools' feelings don't matter. I find it impossible, after reading so much doubt and fear and pain from conquistador and native alike, that La Malinche felt nothing. We're almost done with this, but I have one more thing I want to say on this matter. Diaz, disturbingly, would mention that it was known among the conquistadors who treated his native women well and who treated them poorly. Those treated poorly tended to suddenly disappear and never be seen again. In many ways, you could argue Cortez treated La Malinche well for her seemingly loyal service, but you should make no mistake. This woman has disappeared, and in place of whatever she thought or felt or desired, there are only political agendas projected onto her. After the peace talks with the Maya, the Spanish sailed further up the coast to Aztec territory, landing at San Juan de Ulua, and this is the beginning of formal communications between the two empires. It should be noted here that the Aztec had been tracking Cortez for a while at this point. While Cortez was fighting the Maya, Montezuma was receiving intel. So Cortez met some Aztec ambassadors, fired a cannon again to scare them, because it's funny. The Aztec took a...
If it's not broken, don't go fixing it. It seems... If you got a cannon in the New World, technology hundreds of years advanced from where they are at the current stage, go and flaunt it around. That's, I'm not saying I support what Cortez did. I'm just saying, if you find something that works, stick to it. Once you hit pay dirt, keep digging.
Conquistador helmet to show Montezuma, and then they brought it back, filled to the brim with gold dust, along with countless other treasures and gifts. We hope you will share these great gifts among yourselves and bring word to your King Charles that Montezuma is a kind and powerful ally. Of course, I'd be happy to, but, well, could I meet Montezuma? I wish to give him some gifts in person, and even a nice hug. Well, Montezuma wishes to meet with King Charles, actually. You yourself said he is the great emperor of your people, correct? Oh, I see. No hard feelings? Of course not. Our great friendship will last 1,000 generations. But there is one problem, however. Oh? Have you ever heard of my main man, JC? It stands for Jesus Christ, and he's totally yeet. I do not know what this yeet is, and yet I feel you are not using it correctly.
I can't help but think that the poncho, the center of the poncho looks like a Pokeball. I keep thinking that every time, so I might as well just state it out loud. The center of the poncho looks like a Pokeball and it's distracting me.
Loving Jesus is totally gangsta. I'd love to tell you more about it tonight. We're doing a chill, laid-back Minecraft tournament at the Rec Center later. Think you'll be there? Well, we actually already have our own religion. Hey, that's totally cool, bro. We can just play Minecraft and have a great time. I suspect that the time had will, in fact, be awkward for all involved. Furthermore, the fact that you continue to insist upon my presence at this function makes me think you're not as chill and laid back as you claim to be. There'll be pizza. Oh, okay, what time? And then it turns out you can't win Minecraft, so a tournament doesn't even make sense. We just had to take turns. Cortez had just been told that kids liked Minecraft, so he thought it would help make us like Jesus. My God. What lies and treachery. They tell you, oh, it doesn't have to be about Jesus and the Bible and stuff. We're just having fun. But then it is about the Bible and stuff. And they say there will be pizza, but it's just those cheap square pizzas. And there isn't enough for everyone. It's like 2 slices per person. He made me use the Mad Catz controller. These men, what do they desire? Why have they come? What does it matter? They speak only lies. We should throw them back into the sea from whence they crawled. To what end? They're no threat to us. You say they are treacherous, but does the serpent not strike? Does the jaguar not claw? And yet, they are still subject to my will. No, you don't mean string them along, Ambassador. They want gold, then the gold will flow. Right to me. All right, computer, the plot is thickening. Can you...
Yeah, very interesting. Yes, he is correct. And also, yes, almost any event where free pizza, and I should say this, I was a pizza delivery driver. People don't know how to order for groups of people. I would say, personally, especially if you're dealing with mostly men, eating the said pizza, 4 slices per person is a minimum. That just take that, use it, and plus that's easy math. For every 2 people, you need 1 pizza because each pizza is 8 slices. Also, they should be large, not mediums. If you're going mediums, you might as well order 1 pizza per person. This is Domino's math. Maybe it doesn't apply to your local, pizzeria, which you should be ordering from over the chains, but that's the math. That's what I came up with. And also, no Mad Catz controllers, please. In this day and age, never again. There's too many options. I think 8-bit Tendo or something like that. 8-bit Tendo, I think, is an option out there. My brother has one. It looks awesome. I've been playing games recently, but I plan on getting one once I delve back into games. Maybe with this setup. Stay tuned.
With 2 topics from the Fun and Light folder.
Contained within the Fun and Light folder is mostly pornography of dubious legality and unhinged rants about the Zionist agenda exhibited in the latest Marvel films, both of which are against YouTube's terms of service, as well as common decency.
Apply the parental controls, please. But keep in the thug shaker. I might need that one for when these guys get bored.
Loading. God and violence.
Nice. I was hoping for those. We tend to be a bit hard on the Spaniards, for the countless atrocities they committed in the name of God, but we should note where they're coming from here.
Okay.
Literally, where are they coming from? The Iberian Peninsula, which contains modern-day Spain and Portugal, had been a region of serious religious conflict between Muslims and Christians for centuries by this point, only ending the very same year Columbus discovered Hispaniola with the defeat of Granada.
Several elements
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to go
Spanish
back for that. That was important, and I didn't pay attention completely.
Only region from the Iberian Peninsula, which contains modern-day Spain and Portugal, had been a region of serious religious conflict between Muslims and Christians for centuries by this point, only ending the very same year Columbus discovered Hispaniola with the defeat of Granada.
Several elements framed the Spanish colonization of the Americas. The first was the Reconquista, the 7-century-long process of reconquest of much of Iberia from Muslims who first invaded the region in 711. The protracted Reconquista often proceeded in fits and starts, and the frontier between Muslim and Christian territories was permeable, with sides not always clearly defined. Encyclopedia.com.
Really, computer? Encyclopedia.com?
This format makes it difficult for the viewer to distinguish between commonly accepted wisdom and your spicy YouTuber hot takes. I thought it prescient to establish that this is, in fact, the most boring take imaginable. Regardless, The Reconquista had a profound influence on the development of Iberian Catholicism and Iberian society. Iberian Catholicism became highly chauvinistic, exclusivistic, and militant.
The discovery of the
And I'm starting to see why these guys coming fresh off of that conflict are really excited to convert others, because it's just like a tale as old as time. It's like these conquistadors, these colonizers, were basically hard pressed into, diamonds of sorts, diamonds of Christ through this whole conflict that happened in Spain and Iberia. So obviously they were still thoroughly infused with that. It's amazing. I guess that really adds a new layer to why spreading Christianity was so key to those early, especially the Spaniards who came. I feel like that, I don't know my history well enough, but it does, from what I understand, it doesn't seem like being a missionary converting the native population was as much of a crucial portion of the mission, if you will, in North America, or specifically the Americas, or the United States of America territories, what would become the United States of America. That turned it to be much more just, get them out of here, or trading partners, potentially. So yeah, there's something very interesting about, and kind of enlightening about, these hard times create harder people, and harder people tend to like to inflict their perspective, their worldview upon everybody around them.
Americas slotted nicely into the emerging national identity of the newly united Spain.
The philosophy of the discoveries, the emigration, and the colonization was Christianity. Ferdinand and Isabel, king and queen of a new, if precariously united Spain, had conquered Granada in 1492. They had been hailed by the Pope not only as the Catholic kings, but as athletes of Christ. Conquest, Montezuma, Cortez, and the Fall of Old Mexico by Hugh Thomas.
Every Christian kingdom believed God to be on their side, but the Spanish had significant reason to believe themselves to be the sword of Christ, as they had so far been exactly that. So you see, the Spanish had to do all these terrible, terrible things. Case closed. Let's move on and...
Oh, please, you can't be serious.
God damn it, computer. Now I gotta fucking say shit. The Spanish did not need to go around making everyone love Jesus, or else. You know how I know that? Well, because they didn't always do it. On Bernal Diaz's first two expeditions, zero Jesus. These were primarily scouting expeditions with a bit of trade, but those expeditions found gold. So now, coincidentally, the Spanish had a massive boner for Jesus. But regardless,
Wait,
was
what was
Spanish religious zealotry rooted in history and a cultural trend rather than, just a personal moral failure of these individual men?
People are trapped in history, and history is trapped in them. James Baldwin. So in short, yes.
And was Cortez trying to pick a fight, so he had an excuse to steal shit, and justifying that fight with religion was politically convenient as it preyed upon the emerging Spanish national identity?
Oh yes, absolutely. That guy was a dick. It is not that religion motivated Cortez, rather that religion justified Cortez.
Yep, that's a big difference for anybody out there who's has any questions about their own faith and how it should be applied in the world. It's your faith should motivate you to be a better person, not justify you in your judgments or your condemnations of others, I guess is how I would say. Was it cast the first stone, ye who is without sin?
Why Cortez, in particular, required justification for his actions will be made apparent later. Once this pie person gets all his dick jokes out of the way.
In the meantime, the Spanish decided to head towards a fortified town they'd heard about, named but they got intercepted by 24 natives while en route. They wanted Cortez to meet the king of their city. Cortez accepts, and the expedition is escorted to Zempoala. Here, Bernal Diaz writes that the beauty of the city is dwarfed only by the fatness of its king.
Whoa. Wow.
We appreciate all the food. I can tell your town has plenty to spare. Is that a fat joke? No, that was a sentence. You're the fat joke. All right,
I got to
Dick,
use that one
listen,
in the future.
Do you know what's going on here? No, I don't speak Aztec. We are not Aztec. We are the Totonac people. We are subjects of the Aztec. Also, they call themselves Mexican, pronounced Mexican, as far as I can tell, but for the purposes of clarity, this video will apply the term Aztec to describe them. They're robbers, liars, and cheats. Well, I'm glad I'm here then. I promise to help in any way that is possible, and to prevent these thefts and crimes, since it was for this purpose that our Lord, the Emperor Charles, has sent us to these parts. Really? If you're willing to buy that, sure. Well, we promise to guide you through these strange lands you have zero understanding of, and would never deceive you into furthering our personal political agenda. Wow, you guys are so cool. You know who else was pretty cool? But then, 5 Aztec tax inspectors arrived to the town with impeccably horrible timing.
Oh,
they were
no.
taken prisoner by Cortez and the Totonac, but Cortez had his soldiers secretly bring 2 tax
He corked up
collectors
the
to his
Totonac.
tent in the dead of night. OMG, guys, what happened? We were taken prisoner by you. Whoa, that's crazy. These Totonac guys sure suck, huh? Please go back to Montezuma and let him know I am a friend to the Aztecs.
The following morning,
What? Where did the other 2 prisoners go? I didn't eat them, all right? You can't prove that I did. Well, regardless,
God.
it's clear you can't be trusted with them. I shall...
Wow, this is a great ploy here. I do want to say, I don't know, for some reason it's giving me. Imagine if you were to be learning about America, coming into America, you've just discovered America, and the first person that first person in a position of power you came up to was like hardcore libertarian, like taxation is theft, the United States government is corrupt, blah blah blah, and then you were to just believe them, and you had the power to potentially knock out the United States government. It's dangerous to just believe the first person you talk to. It's sometimes necessary for survival also. So that's the push and pull. That's why you got to sit on the fence, man.
move them to my ship for safekeeping.
One ship embarking later.
All right, you're free, go home. Montezuma friendly, one big misunderstanding. You get it. No? I feel like we're missing something. Oh, what's going on? I don't fucking know. I'm scheming here, man. Just go tell Montezuma I shit rainbows or something. I don't give a shit. With these moves, Cortez accomplished two things. Number one, the Totonac people were now in open rebellion and imprisoning tax collectors. And number two, Montezuma had been weakened, but was still unsure if the Spanish were at fault. At least, this is the Spanish interpretation of what happened. Considering the lack of native accounts and Cortez's ignorance of the area and its complex web of allegiances, we may never know, but I have found, while writing this video, it's generally best practice to assume Cortez is not as much of a master manipulator as he and his supporters like Diaz were saying he was. Reading between the lines, my personal interpretation was that Cortez's big driving instinct was to muddy the waters, to confuse the natives as much as they confused him. However, one could argue, as we will later,
a great instinct if you're at war. If your goal is not necessarily to build bridges, but to burn them.
Cortez was inconsistent because what is often attributed to Cortez should rather be attributed to a select group of influential and experienced captains who constantly fucking bickered. We'll get into that possibility in more depth later. Regardless, we see here that Cortez has studied Sun Tzu's art of war, always troll when given the opportunity to do so. It is at this point we must discuss who exactly this Hernan Cortez was. Hernan Cortez was appointed as captain of this expedition by Cuban governor Diego Velázquez. Velázquez was a man with much experience in the New World, even being present during Christopher Columbus's second expedition in 1493 and leading the invasion of Cuba. Cortez would also participate in that invasion, but seemed to have done nothing to distinguish himself. Cortez's appointment as captain was controversial for the simple reason that Cortez had once participated in a plot to get the Spanish king to remove Diego Velázquez as governor, and had even been imprisoned for a time by him. To quote from Machiavelli's The Prince, an ancient guide on how to rule,
If a man tries to stab you in the back, you should
An ancient guide on how to rule, I think is how I'm going to present it. But, rule as in like, man, this guy rules.
later give that man 608 men, 16 horses, 11 ships, 32 crossbowmen, and 13 musketeers.
The reason Velasquez gave Cortez, a man of little renown and dubious allegiances, this appointment, he thought he could control him, presumably due to his relative obscurity and inexperience. Cortez couldn't exactly disobey Velasquez if Cortez couldn't command respect from his men, and what authority Cortez had was derived exclusively from Velasquez.
Yeah, that's nice and all for Velasquez, except for this is the first time I've heard Velasquez's name, for better or worse. I don't think he quite played that card correctly.
Velasquez needed a dog on a tight leash.
Velasquez wanted someone to lead the venture who would first show more imagination than the last expedition leader, and second, be able to finance part or even all of the expenses. But he did not want it to be a great armada of conquest. That would be led by himself when he had authority from Spain.
That sounds smart, right? Well, guess what? So does phrenology.
Cortez was, above all, a survivor, and in the lethally dangerous world of the 16th century Spanish Indies, that made him highly untrustworthy. When Montezuma met Cortez by Matthew Restall.
Velasquez would end up changing his mind at the last minute, but Cortez already had the guns and ships and men, and he told him to kick bricks. So you can already see that Cortez is already in, well, a very Caesar-like position. He even made the classic, "die as cast" comment. His command could be insanely profitable to himself, but was also illegal. But also, I mean, let's be real here, doesn't the guy with the guns decide what's illegal? Or rather, do the men holding the guns decide? Julius Caesar's iron grip on...
I mean, in all honesty, that's a great question. It's like, what is the legality in these expeditions? Is it it kind of just becomes might makes right at a certain point, but is it like, are we holding them to this standards of the native people's legal system? Are we holding them to the standards of Spain's? I bet you Spain was probably pretty loose and pretty quick to bend the rules they would normally enforce, with the promise of gold coming to them.
His legions was unquestionable. Caesar led them against barbaric Gauls in the frozen north, Egyptians in the Sahara, and even against other Romans. I'm reminded of the time when Caesar's legions, after their retirement, kept getting delayed by all these goddamn wars that Caesar just kept starting, decided to mutiny the moment Caesar needed them most. So how did Julius Caesar get them back under his command? He thanked them for their service, told them to go home, and called them civilians. So they all cried and hugged it out, and went to Africa to do some epic trolling to Cato.
Caesar also had the ringleaders of the mutiny killed, but sometimes it be like that.
Isn't that a great story?
That'd be.
About command, respect, identity, and loyalty. It is. But here's the important part. It fucking makes sense. Caesar was accomplished. He had shown himself to be ruthless, bold, effective, but also forgiving and incredibly generous when he was able. Cortez was tight-fisted and paranoid.
You're greedy. Your greed is hurting the economy. That classic. Yeah, that's very. I mean, tale as old as time. As I always say, these things, they continue on. It's not. We aren't different people than we used to be. We just have different means, and we've been steeped in different cultures, possibly. But at the end of the day, we're all animals, and some of the animals are hungrier than others. Yeah, sexually. I mean, worse things to commit horrible acts of genocide for, I guess. I don't know. This is all very muddy. I don't even want to joke about the sex slave portion. But yes, I also think of this as how people think, and this is how people wall themselves up into an offensive position of never being satisfied. They just constantly tell themselves that they don't have enough, that they are still hungrier and hungrier, and you have to be careful of those who don't seem to have a stop. Here, this is a little personal. I would consider myself somebody who has a bit of a drinking problem, and I think almost in a negative way, one of the aspects of my drinking problem, unlike other alcoholics, is I have hard stops, or, I reach a level of satisfaction. Usually it's at the end of 6 tall boys. Miller Lite is my go-to. That will usually do me. I don't need any more. I can go to sleep. Some alcoholics, though, will keep drinking until their body stops, until that's their stop, their physical body telling them they can no longer do that. And then they wake up and they maybe postpone as long as possible, but eventually you can't anymore and you have the shakes. I'm not making any promises, but I think my next video is going to be talk about Infinite Jest a bit. The one that I do like with editing and talking about my own opinions. I want to share this book with you, and I know the best way to do it. So all of that said, let me go back to my original point. But yeah, so be careful of those people who don't have limits, who don't have stops, who just want more and more and are never satisfied. You need to define for yourself what is enough and live within that, because enough is a feast.
Even according to Diaz. Beyond that, Cortez could not appeal to his men's sense of service and fraternity like Caesar did. Conquistadors certainly felt some sense of national pride and faith in their religion, of course, but these men had not spent years fighting and training together as a cohesive unit. This was like most conquistador expeditions, a loose coalition of armed and fundamentally self-interested investors looking for profit. Despite the claims by Diaz of Cortez's charm and grace, men don't follow charming and graceful men into hell. They follow effective and dependable men into hell. Are you gonna go die for a used car salesman who has already double-crossed his boss? Caesar conquered Gaul, led an adventure to the cold, mysterious Isle of Britain, defeated Pompey the Great in open battle, instigated then ended an Egyptian civil war, then some fuckface in Turkey thought he could take advantage of all this Roman instability, so Caesar came and saw and conquered. What did Cortez do before the fall of the Aztecs? Nothing. What did he accomplish after the fall of the Aztecs? Failure after failure. Before the fall of the Aztecs...
Reminds me of other rich investment banking, speculative investor types that have come and gone. Sometimes all it takes to make history and put your name in the paper is one big fuck up, in all honesty, without a better word to say. Sometimes you just have to rely upon those curses. I think that is the like, if I don't mean to, I feel like I'm going to get a lot of hate comments for some of the things I might end up saying in this video, but if the person who conquered and destroyed the Aztecs, made them go extinct, had gone on to create a better world or what have you, or had obliterated the Aztec peoples but created the Mexican people as we know them today through leadership, probably would be at the very least not a villain of history, maybe a complicated person of history to say the least. But this person just made the history books and got their name, Cortez got their name right up there with some of the greats just by going through and fucking up a nation, a people, a culture, just driving a fist, a spear through them. It's seemingly, I'm sure we're going to get more into it. This is called the death of the Aztec, or was it the fall of the Aztec? We're going to get to it, but it seems to me, if I'm just assuming here, Cortez is basically the spear that punctures the vital organ. Maybe it takes a while for the Aztecs to bleed out culturally as a people, but I'm assuming Cortez is the one who laid the fatal blow.
Cortez was Velázquez's personal assistant, and after the fall of the Aztecs, he would in time be removed from his position of governor of New Spain. At this point in our story, Velázquez sends news to Cortez that he'd received the title of Adelantado. I'm trying, I promise, which translates to advance, and should be thought of as sort of a forward man. This title is what Velázquez had been waiting for when he initially authorized Cortez's expedition, as it gave him the right to not just trade or explore, but to conquer and establish forts. Adelantado was, to put it simply, a license. to loot. This compelled Cortez to stop a mutiny from some Velázquez loyalists and send all the valuables found so far to the Spanish crown as, well, a bribe.
This is King Charles V. He would rule not only Spain, but also the Holy Roman Empire. Why, yes, he is a Habsburg. How could you tell?
As discussed in the last video, the Spanish
I wasn't going to pause to say it, but yeah, I was picking up on that jawline.
crown taxed 1/5 of the booty found in the Americas. So Cortez's action was both a bribe and a cocky move intended to communicate, man, you can have this gold for free. We're gonna find way more. Unlike that loser Velázquez. Velázquez hears of this and sends a message to the crown declaring Cortez a total treasonous dick who should be arrested. Bear in mind as our story continues that the Spanish crown is actively mulling over this fight, as the fight is, of course, for who will administer these new territories. Cortez would win this battle, but lose the war. As we progress through this story, it will become clear that Cortez was, in many ways, used by the crown. But for the moment, Cortez needed a big win. His back was to the wall. Anything less than a massive success would lead to legal consequences. Cortez's attempt to bribe the crown with
That almost reminds me of something in The Art of War, actually, where Sun Tzu says that you should never put your rival, your opponent, into a position where they cannot retreat, because that is when the most vicious portion, their most vicious instincts take place. That's when an upset can happen. You always give them the ability to retreat so that they have that in the back of their mind. They can escape with their lives. If you tell them it's your life or my life, you'd be surprised what can come out of people when they're in that position. So suffice to say, Cortez here has I assume what he is saying is, if Cortez returns to Spain without some sort of form of total victory, some sort of big pillage on his record, he will have legal consequences. He has to kind of go above and beyond. So they've sort of backed him into a corner where there is no escape aside from through, and that through is the spear through the Aztec people.
gold was only the beginning. He was going to bribe the crown with an empire. But who exactly was bribing the crown? This is the command knot.
Okay.
Greater men than us have tried to untangle it, but thankfully we can copy their homework when they're not looking. Has every decision assigned to Cortez
nerd. That's what
actually
you
been
get.
Cortez's decision? Considering the lack of actual experience and the fact that he was accompanied by captains with a ton of experience, could it be that Cortez was, in practice, a puppet? Perhaps Velázquez's instinct that Cortez was easy to control was absolutely correct. The only problem was that other men would end up in control. Cortez could even be interpreted as the fall guy, who just lucked out
Interesting.
enough to be given credit for what occurred, rather than being blamed for what occurred and executed for it. In Diaz's account, the other captains beg Cortez to break with Velázquez, establish a colony, and actually go to Montezuma. On the surface, this is an act of unwavering loyalty to Cortez, but does it reveal a more complex truth?
The truth was so obvious that Bernal Diaz blurted it out. The plan to invade the Aztecs was hatched by the dominant group of captains. Diaz was eager to place himself at the center of the group, which was surely unlikely. At least half a dozen documents were composed, signed, and sent to Spain over the course of the next 6 months, revealing a clear agenda and commitment on the part of a core faction of captains.
Regardless of who made the call, the Spanish scuttled their ships and built the colony of Villarica de la Veracruz, a name which translates, "Stop it, you are such a pain in the ass, cat." A name which
I
translates
feel you,
to
brother.
the rich village of the True Cross, a name more Spanish than a bullfighter getting gored because he decided to take a siesta mid-bullfight. Now, this is a topic of contention. Matthew Ristall speculates that the ships were actually rotting and in disrepair, so the decision was made to beach them and salvage the iron fittings and riggings.
Puerto Carrero and Montejo, who were questioned the following spring in Spain, testified that it was ship captains and pilots who determined that their ships were rotting, and they proposed the beaching. Even Tapia, who otherwise follows Gomara's contrived tale of Cortesian cleverness, admitted that several captains reported that their ships were unseaworthy.
Less than 10% of the Spaniards that were present during this would survive to tell the tale.
Oh, wow.
That's less than 25 people. Among those,
Whew. All right. Well, but I mean, proportionately, they both sides put up pretty rough numbers. Wow.
How many would even be able to argue against Cortez?
Also, yeah, like at 25 people, you can get 25 people to agree to the same story, from, moving forward. If it is required for you to, if you have an entire continent between you, or an entire ocean between you and the people that you have to report to, and it's for everybody's benefit, and definitely for higher ups benefit, for everybody to be on the same tail, you can craft a pretty solid lie and get everybody to agree to it at 25, especially at this time, at this era of history.
Cortez was writing letters to Spain at this time, which were printed and spread through Europe like wildfire. In fact, they were so popular that the printing of them would be restricted by King Charles V in fear of Cortez's growing popularity. Beyond that, later in his life, he and his son would commission a book by historian Francisco López de Gamarra, which was, of course, very favorable to Cortez.
Big surprise.
And mostly constructed of his personal account. How could Cortez command such an absolute, unwavering loyalty from his men if he had, prior to this, never commanded any men at all? How could he be so ruthlessly effective here if, after this, he was always horribly ineffective? The story is breaking down. The story told for centuries. The story of Cortez boldly putting down a mutiny, taking control of his men, burning his ships, and founding the first colony in Mexico. Was the first permanent colony in Mexico a bold political move by Cortez, or was it a decision pinned on Cortez by a small group of experienced captains, and Cortez accepted because he saw his one and probably only chance ever at fame and fortune? Were the ships dramatically destroyed by Cortez, so as to give his men the resolve needed to commit to a bold conquest, or were they just salvaged for parts because they'd become unseaworthy? The ships definitely...
Sorry for interrupting him, but I was just going to say, like, if you're doing one, if you're salvaging, and when I say this to my to friends in my business, and probably revealing a little too much behind the curtains, the green curtains behind me, if you're going to strip the ships and they're already unseaworthy, why the hell wouldn't you burn them? I mean, at the very least, for the cool factor, it sends a message. And if you're going to burn your ships, why not change the tune? You didn't burn them because they were unseaworthy. You burned them to send a message. Just remember, like, this is how history, first-hand account history can't be trusted, because people rewrite the narratives. They have a better idea of why they did something, and then thus that's the reason they did it. That's, and I think that in business too, it's like, if you're forced to make a decision, well, actually, no. And yet again, this could be a whole video, but I have this personal opinion that every decision that everyone makes, they make for two reasons. There's the public reason that's what they're going to tell you is the reason they made their decision. Oh, I give to charity because of, it's so important to me. And my mom died of cancer, and whatever it is, I don't want to disparage anybody, because this is just, we all do this. It's not even something we're guilty of. It's just how the human mind works. And then there's the private reason. That's I needed to, look, I was at the end of the tax season. I needed to, give myself a little extra, take a little extra top off my income tax. Why not give to charity? If I'm going to have to give it to the government, I might as well give it to charity. That sort of thing. And almost every decision, you have both, and nobody, and this is something to learn. I think this is where a lot of social faux pas come from. If you want to be socially well received and liked, honor the public reason and never put light on the private reason. If you want to be, if you want to be Mr. Detective, Mr. Accountant, you're going to have to shine a light on the public or the private reason. So, like I said, that could be a whole other video, but suffice to say, if you're done with the ships anyways, you might as well burn them. And if you're going to burn the ships, you might as well make it poetic.
were not burned, by the way. That does not appear until much later accounts. Regardless,
He should have burned
Villarica
them.
de la Vera Cruz was created to control the narrative, and the only question is whose narrative it was.
The founding of Villarica de la Vera Cruz permitted a given group of conquistadors to turn themselves into a cabildo, and they thereby acquired standing sufficient to make certain kinds of resolutions, laws, and other legally valid decisions.
The goal of Cortez's expedition, explicitly, according to the legal documentation permitting it, was
To acquire as much gold as possible and, having acquired it, return with it to the island of Cuba, in order that it may be enjoyed only by Diego Velázquez and the captain, Cortez.
Yeah, in the beginning of this video, when I said the mission objective was to get gold and party, I was not being facetious. I like providing, historical context and stuff, but, these guys were apes. At one point during this expedition, some of the conquistadors would get mad at Cortez for keeping all of the hot sex slaves for himself. Cortez would assist in the destruction.
Bro, that's why he wasn't a good leader. Sometimes when the hot sex slaves come by, you got to share them with their most loyal, most dedicated. You have to spread the wealth. And that, yet again, does not need to just apply to sex slaves. There's things that are much more applicable today. But if you're going to be a leader, you have to, you can't just take it all. You could take it all, but you're not going to be a leader for long. You got to spread the wealth amongst your most core people, even the low man on the totem pole. Sometimes they sometimes they need the good alcohol to get through the night, to kind of give them resolve so that they don't be burnt out. And they think that you giveth and you taketh away kind of thing. There's a lot that goes into leadership, but it's hoarding all the hotties, all the baddies. Never going to get you. You just would not recommend.
Of one of the greatest empires ever built, and his primary motivation, besides the obvious benefits, was justifying his illegal actions to the crown. Villarica, as a colony, even if it was still under construction, could elect a town council, or cabildo. The town council declared the expedition of Diego Velázquez complete, relieving the men and Cortez of any obligations they had to the governor, and therefore giving the men the freedom to choose a new objective.
New objective. Tell Montezuma to stop doing human sacrifices.
Cortez would of course say that this new plan to
I'm just going to say seems like a heroic or justified objective, but it also seems like the kind of objective that allows you to justify a lot of bad moral decisions, to say the least. Objective, provide freedom for the Iraqi people. Results? Well, that's for another video.
literally walk into Montezuma's throne room and tell him to love Jesus, or else, was motivated by Aztec cruelty. Obviously, though, the objective was a politically convenient one. It was basically just a backwards-ass way to declare war, because Cortez couldn't declare war. He had zero authority to do that, and that would result in some very big lies down the road. If you walked into the president's office with a handgun and demanded he stop doing capitalisms, that's declaring war on America. Or so I've been told by my lawyer. So, the Spanish began a several days long march, braving cold mountain passes they had not prepared for. They stopped for a bit at a small town called Cocotlan, and the town's lord directed Cortez to Tlaxcalan, a small kingdom, unfriendly to the Aztecs, yet totally surrounded by their empire. Unfortunately for Cortez, the Tlaxcalteca did not much like him either, as his messengers he sent ahead were imprisoned.
As Fray Juan Diaz reported, here were people who lived in stone houses and had laws and regulations and public places assigned for the administration of justice. They had fine clothing, gold, abundant food, and were skillful in various ways.
The Spanish in the New World had by this point mostly fought natives in the Caribbean, but the interior of Mexico, where they were now, was the most advanced and populous area of the New World. According to Diaz himself...
Interesting, because that would be the opposite for the current America. You would say that the coastlines are the most advanced, I presume. That would actually be good to look into. But, you know, like when we think of like super sophisticated culture, super technologically forward culture, we usually think of like the West Coast and the East Coast and like the middle of America. Yeah, awesome, amazing. But that's where you get like the Rust Belt. That's where you get like, the Mississippi Delta, or, just the poor of Louisiana. That's like usually where you think of the less advanced, the less prosperous parts of America. So, but probably different back then because they weren't trading externally as we are today. So wait, I'm actually talking myself through this and the logic of it. Their economy was very much derived from farm economy, as America's was once. It's only in this day and age when it's all about exports and imports that the coast becomes so much more wealthy than the interior of a country, because unfortunately, while we can't eat iPhones, we act like they're going to feed us. Hopefully that made sense. Hey, that made sense in the comments. Tell me it made sense. And if not, try to make sense of it.
Montezuma could field over 150,000 troops, whereas the Cortez expedition numbered only around 600 at its peak. And these were not exclusively fighting men. The Spanish were fighting among stone houses and streets and fields of corn, and the political system was otherwise independent city-states who were compelled by the Aztec to supply tribute and soldiers in time of war. This is what you must keep in mind as the Tlaxcalteca attacked the Spanish, in the largest engagement the Spanish had seen up to this point. At one point during the battle, some of the Tlaxcalteca attempted to capture a Spanish horse, but, well...
They slashed at the rider's mare, cutting her head at the neck so that it only hung by the skin.
Ooh.
This is who we're talking about here.
Oh,
These
badass.
people the Spanish are fighting are not the Aztecs. They're enemies of the Aztec. And one of them nearly beheaded a horse by accident. The weapon used, though, would have been similar to Aztec weaponry. The Macuahuitl fucking god, that's how it's spelled. A wooden bat lashed with shards of obsidian was a fucking...
Yeah, I mean, on that point, I'm sure that if you were to go to Mexico and whether they be cartel soldiers or militia soldiers, I bet you they're going to be probably sporting the AR-15 as their rifle. We don't have any, here in America, we technically don't really have any political allegiances to those people, and we don't have any reason for us to have, we didn't provide them the weapons, but weaponry tends to be pretty regional. Like once it's considered efficient and figured out and it can cut the head off a fucking horse, pretty sure you're just going to keep making that weapon.
Terrifying two-handed sword wielded by Mesoamerican warriors. Imagine the sheer blunt force of a massive two-handed club, further augmented by sharp obsidian blades, which provide plus 10 damage and the "oh god, what the fuck is that" status effect. Obsidian, to be clear, is an insanely sharp material, still used in surgical tools today. Of course, the downside of obsidian is that it's more brittle than the ego of a YouTuber. But even after it's broken, you still got a big fuck-off club. But forget about weaponry. The Aztec at this time were no joke. Montezuma had extended the empire's borders to their furthest extent. Cortez did not stumble into a fading empire, he stumbled into one at the peak of its power, albeit, dare I say, a little overextended and politically unstable, judging by the restlessness of its subjects and the fact that Montezuma
down with taxation,
often had to put down rebellions during his reign. That being said, he would put them down with a fucking vengeance. According to Aztec tax records, they had over 350 distinct tribes paying tribute to them. I'm saying all this because I need you to understand that when Cortez entered a region supposedly anti-Aztec and therefore friendly to him, he was still getting attacked and sustaining serious casualties. The Tlaxcalteca response to the Spanish is, of course, very understandable. The Spanish were an unknown quantity. Why were they here? What did they want? Were they gods? No, and we'll get to that crock of shit later, but they were fucking weird and unknown. These questions would be asked of Cortez by every native he spoke to, and each one, it seemed, got different answers. Cortez was not a great military mind, he was a water muddier. At every available chance, he misled the natives he came across, feeding contradictory information. Yeah, real 5D chess kind of guy, huh?
It sounds like I don't know. It sounds like insert political enemy here kind of thing. It just sounds like the tactics of people who want to get ahead, who want to get more than what they should receive.
always in control of the situation, except for in Tlaxcalan, as the Tlaxcalteca people there had mistakenly believed Cortez was an ally of Montezuma. I don't blame them for thinking that, considering he'd said as much like 10 goddamn times. Furthermore, he entered the region from Aztec territory with Native American allies who were, at least nominally, Aztec subjects. Morale at this point was, well, we want to go home. But we just got here. Yeah, we know. We haven't even fought an Aztec yet, and we're still taking casualties. My stomach hurts. Derek's stomach hurts. Oh,
Goddamn
well.
Derek.
We can't all be big dick adventuring bad boys for Jesus like me, I guess. I got some shirts made for all of us, but I suppose that was just wishful thinking. It was nice adventuring
I want one of those shirts.
with you boys. Just take the boats home, and I'll see you when I see you. The boats are rotting on the beach. Well, I can't be blamed for that. I'm a Sagittarius. Just take all that gold we got and go home already. You sent all of our gold to Spain so as to undercut the Cuban governor and get the king's blessing for your insane suicide mission to... What is this? What are we even doing? We are going to ask Montezuma, the powerful and cruel god king of the Aztecs, to stop doing human sacrifices. You're going to walk into the throne room of a man whose job is to kill people, and ask him to stop killing people. Yes. You don't think he's just gonna kill you? Now, why exactly would someone kill someone after learning that killing is bad? Come on, man, think with your head. What will you do if he refuses? I'll kill him. Thankfully, Tlaxcalteca attacked...
How dare you murder someone? You must be murdered for that.
Subsided as Cortez's many peace messages were finally agreed to. They sent the Spaniards many splendid gifts, among them some old ladies. Now at this point, other natives had gifted women to the Spaniards already, but they were usually young and for boning. These old women were gifted for eating. The Tlaxcalteca were unsure if the Spaniards ate people, at least according to Diaz. I guess it's nice to cover your bases. At this point, Cortez has as many suitors as the only unimpregnated girl in an Alabama middle school. Both Tlaxcalteca and Aztec messengers were visiting Cortez. The Tlaxcalteca wanted Cortez to come visit their capital and make the peace official, whereas the Aztecs told Cortez not to visit the capital, as the Tlaxcalteca were sneaky and treacherous. In the end, though, Cortez would visit Tlaxcalan.
The badly bruised company spent 17 days in Tlaxcalan, roughly a day of recovery for each grim day of warfare. Almost every Spaniard had suffered wounds of some kind, and while most recovered, some died, reducing total Spanish numbers to fewer than 250.
From 600,
half
I
the
believe.
force that had left Cuba. The survivors must have been traumatized and terrified.
I would be.
Their relief at being able to experience the hospitality rather than the hostility of the Tlaxcalteca must have been tempered by the knowledge that the invaders were at the mercy of their hosts, dependent upon them for food and supplies, for information about the Aztecs, and for allied warriors to protect them from whatever came next.
While in Tlaxcalan, Cortez would meet with the Tlaxcalteca leader, the blind old king, Xicotenga. You must understand, our attacks came from our fear, not our fury. My son, who led the attacks, he believed you to be allies of the Aztec. Those guys? I can't stand them. You arrived armed and armored, marching in formation with an almost entirely male force. You're lucky I'm blind. If I saw how you rolled up to my kingdom with my own two eyes, you would have been dead a week ago.
Yep.
You walked in here disrespectful as shit. Okay, maybe the optics weren't great. You must understand the fear my people have for the Aztecs. We fought them many times over the last century. While we are brave, they are many. And time has seen their empire grow to surround our peoples. You know the Aztec ambassadors are sitting right behind me, right? No, obviously I do not know that. I'm blind. It's my thing. Fuck you, old man. You know who can cure the blind? Who? My main man, JC, stands for Jesus Christ. He's totally hip. And I think it would be cherry of you to cast down your evil demonic statues or else, and worship the one true God. When can this man arrive to cure my blindness?
Oh, that reminds me. I have a video called One True God about the objective existence of God in the Indiana Jones universe. It's a really solid video. The original video by itself is solid, and I would highly recommend watching my react.
Oh, well, I mean, it doesn't really work like that. Oh, really? Then maybe you should shut the fuck up. We've known each other for 2 weeks, and half of that time we've been killing each other. Read the room. Maybe you should read it first, you blind bitch.
Was he going to be
and
reading
Zico Tango
Blind
showed
Bitch?
Cortez a giant bone and explained how his people were descended from giants.
Oh.
It was probably like a mammoth bone or something, so, that's cool.
Yeah.
Or it was a giant bone, stay woke. Cortez at this point decides to continue on to Tenochtitlan, the Aztec capital, through the city of Cholula. Famous for its hot sauce, which is not nearly as good as Louisiana-style sauces. I'll see you in the comments section. And the city of Cholula was also where Aztecs would prepare for invasions of Tlaxcalan, according to the Tlaxcalteca, at least. The Tlaxcalteca Spanish War was short, but of huge importance. Cortez had gained a massive ally, but lost much to gain it. Let's recap. Before this, the Spanish had interacted with the natives on Cozumel, some Mayan tribes, the Totonac, who were just waiting to revolt, and the Tlaxcalteca, who were longtime Aztec enemies. But from this point forward, that's done. This is deep Aztec territory. But were they at war with the Aztecs? That is what is fascinating about the story from this point forward. Cortez and Montezuma are in a constant state of, we're at war, but I'm not sure yet, both attempting to maintain plausible deniability. And naturally, when he showed up at the gates of Cholula with 1,000 warriors of an enemy nation, they were pissed, refusing to allow them entry, and forcing the Tlaxcalteca to camp outside the city, while the Spanish were allowed inside. And this is the Cholula knot. It is a topic with centuries of heated debate, but in the interest of transparency.
These are the things we can say with reasonable certainty. 1.
Okay.
The Spanish entered the city on October 10th, while a significantly larger contingent of Tlaxcalteca warriors were kept outside the city. 2. They stayed there for a much shorter time than they stayed at other cities, somewhere between 3 and 5 days. 3. The Spanish and Tlaxcalteca would surprise attack the people of the city, cutting down many unarmed men, women, and children in what has since become known as the Cholula Massacre.
Seems cut and dry, right? The Spanish were bastards. Sounds good. I hate Catholics anyway.
Don't you think this event,
Hey, buddy.
considering it's the first military engagement against Aztec subjects by the Spanish-Tlaxcalteca alliance, merits closer investigation? The Cholula Massacre was actually exceedingly strange behavior from the Spanish.
God damn it, fine. To untangle the knot, let us examine the threads involved, which is to say, the conflicting and contradictory narratives that to this day are tossed around wantonly, like your mom's panties at that Alice in Chains concert you would end up being conceived at. Here's the Bernal Diaz thread. When the Spanish arrived in Cholula, the welcome party was chilly. In fact, shockingly, they did not choose to accept the Lord and Savior Jesus Christ into their hearts. Can you fucking believe it?
And, time and time again, they're offering old JC up here. Sounds amazing. Got the pizza party ready. They still are so damn stubborn. No wonder things happened.
Just kept getting worse.
Yeah,
During the
jeez.
several days Cortez stayed, the noblemen there stopped bringing food, and when Cortez asked what was up, they apologized and later returned with just firewood and water. The Spanish even noticed Cholulan residents would laugh at them from the distance, in a mocking manner, and the city, while grand and impressive, was remarkably empty.
All was now prepared. The soldiers whom Montezuma had sent with such speed were hidden in shelters and thickets about 1.5 miles from Cholula, while others were posted in the houses, and all had their arms ready. Breastworks had been built on the roofs, holes had been dug in the streets, barricades had been erected to impede the movements of our horses, and in some of the houses they had collected the long poles, leather collars, and ropes with which they were to secure us when they led us to Mexico.
Ooh, that's kinky. Some Totonac allies alerted Cortez to hidden holes dug in the streets and filled with spikes so as to stop cavalry. Some Tlaxcalteca alerted Cortez to the fact that the Cholulans had done a great sacrifice to their war god during the night. And La Malinche was pulled aside by the wife of a chief and told that Montezuma had planned a sneak attack on the Spaniards, and begged Malinche to run away before it was too late, because her son needed a wife and Malinche had one of them holes that babies came out of. Cortez bribed a few native priests for the full lowdown on what was going on, and found that Montezuma had ordered this sneak attack to be carried out while the Spanish exited the city. The hills were filled, supposedly, with Aztec warriors. The night before the expedition left Cholula, the conquistadors planned, and the following morning, all the nobles and priests of the town were gathered in a courtyard. We wish you luck on your journey, Cortez. Luck? I have no need of such things. I have the power of God, and anime on my side. Anime? Oh, in 500 years, these guys on the other side of the world are going to make this thing called Dragon Ball Z.
Oh, hell yeah,
and your
brother.
descendants are going to be obsessed with it. But, that doesn't matter. We didn't gather you here for a farewell. Then...
All of our descendants are, every descendant is obsessed with Dragon Ball Z. But I will say, it really took a hold in, the American and Mexican cultures. I feel like I'd love to see to travel the world with a picture of Goku and see how many cultures could identify him.
Are we here? I offered you Minecraft. Excuse me?
Oh,
Minecraft. No. Ice cream socials.
Yeah.
We were even going to do a lock-in at the community center and spend all night playing Wii Bowling.
Oh, God.
But it seems your people do not understand the virtues of such acts. The simple pleasures of Jesus-sanctioned youth-centric after-school activities. The sweet taste of a warm Capri Sun during an afternoon game of flag football. Because you people have a taste only for blood. And the games you play are ones only of treachery. We can play some Minecraft, and Minecraft night is over. Let's try a sermon. Something Old Testament. Some fire and brimstone. Have you ever heard the story of Sodom and Gomorrah? The heavily armed and armored Spanish cut down the treacherous noble.
Just want to stop and say, I think DJ Peach Cobbler, if you're watching this, I would really love for you to, and bask, I guess, in somebody loving your work. I think you deserve it. I think maybe you need it. But bro, your sketches are amazing. Like the through line in this one video, I don't know how consistent it's going to be throughout all the videos, but the Minecraft, the Minecraft lock-in, to Jesus pipeline through line has been amazing.
Men and priests trapped helplessly in the courtyard. Those left in the city would, of course, attempt to escape.
Yeah.
But the Tlaxcalteca were waiting for them. In fact, considering the very small distance between the two cities, during the days of bloodshed, more Tlaxcalteca would come, and the carnage would only get worse with time. Diaz takes time to blame the Tlaxcalteca for their overwhelming bloodlust and greed in the conflict, but frankly, bloodlust should be expected. They'd been fighting Aztecs for a century by this point, and were just handed a golden chance to fuck them up. At least they had a reason to be mad at these guys. This is just the way humans act, It's like judging a dog for doing that thing they do, where they sort of do a little circle before they lay down.
Oh.
What the fuck's up with that anyway?
I'm not going to let you keep watching. Interrogate the text, you fool. I swear to God, this is just like that time with the Holocaust and the kitten calendar.
Well, someone's got to figure out why dogs do that, but regardless, the account obviously favors the Spanish, Cortez, and their allies. It makes the Aztecs out to be treacherous, the Spanish out to be sharp and observant, Cortez out to be decisive and in control of the situation, and of course, it makes the Totonac and Tlaxcalteca out to look like strong and supportive allies. Let's examine the second thread. This is the account of Bernardino the Unpronounceable de Sahagún, a man who assembled his account a few decades later from the testimonies of Cholulan natives who were present during the attack. So, this is the closest thing we have to the other side of the story, unfortunately. Native words pushed through a Spanish pen, but do bear in mind, these native words are Cholulan words, not Tlaxcalteca words.
Okay.
The Spaniards went to Cholula, taking the Tlaxcalteca and Totonac with them dressed for war. When they arrived, they shouted for all noblemen, rulers, captains, chiefs, and also the men of the town to assemble in the courtyard of the gods. When they had all gathered, the Spaniards and their allies blocked the entrances, all of the places where one could enter. In the first moment, people were murdered and beaten. Nothing like this was in the minds of the Cholulans. Without swords or shields, they met the Spaniards. Without warning, they were treacherously and deceitfully slain. They were ambushed because the Tlaxcalteca persuaded the Spaniards to do it.
There are other versions of this event. In Cortez's letters specifically, he says that he got tipped off by La Malinche, and that's the only tip that he got. This strikes me as very safe. If this was a mistake, it was a native woman's mistake. If Cortez lost control of the narrative, throwing an entire civilization that was indispensable to the war effort under the bus, that's a bad idea.
Yeah.
Throwing a single native woman under the bus, well, that's pretty easy. Regardless, was the Cholula massacre a Spanish attempt to get ahead of a planned Aztec attack, or were they tricked into committing this atrocity by their allies? My initial knot untangling led me to the following conclusion. It's okay if it's not yours. The Spanish were on edge, the Tlaxcalteca wanted blood. The Tlaxcalteca knew the area and its politics, and leveraged this to their benefit by tricking the Spaniards into assisting in an assault on their old enemies. But Matthew Ristal brought something absolutely incredible to my attention. But for the significance of it to be understood, unfortunately, you will have to learn some things about history.
Ooh.
Is that not the point of all this nonsense? What is the point of this video if not learning more about history?
Computer, I made this video for one reason and one reason alone: to dunk on Catholics. Anything else is a distraction, but here we go. The Aztec
I'll see you in the paint, buddy.
Empire could be more accurately described as the Aztec Triple Alliance, a term many history nerds now use, but not me, because I'm cool and I fuck. And also, in the 100
Hell
years
yeah.
during which the empire grew, Tenochtitlan would emerge as the dominant political force and de facto leader. The second most prominent city with serious little man syndrome was Texcoco, and the third burnout black sheep of the family was Tlacopan. The Tlaxcalan government was very similar. Another regional triple alliance between cities where over the decades one would emerge as the de facto leader. In this case, the city of, Tlaxcalan, which was ruled by the aforementioned blind king Xicotenga, which is the Spanish version of his more accurate Nahuatl name, Xicotencatl, but fuck that. The thing is, the Tlaxcalan Triple Alliance wasn't a triple alliance by the time the Spanish had shown up, because several years before their arrival, Cholula had defected to the Aztec. Xicotenga, what is best in life? To crush your enemies, to see them driven before you, and to provide shocking plot twists to YouTube videos made half a millennium from now. Furthermore, Cholula was a strange place to stop on the way to Tenochtitlan. There were other cities with plenty of supplies on a more direct route. Already, it looks like the Tlaxcalteca were dictating where the expedition would go.
The fact is, neither Cortez nor his fellow captains were in control. The Tlaxcalteca led the Spaniards to Cholula for their own political purposes, telling the Spanish captains that it was on the way and rich in supplies.
Wow.
The alleged Cholulan ambush was probably a Tlaxcalteca ruse devised to manipulate the captains, or as Alva Ixotlilxochitl later wrote, an invention of the Tlaxcalteca and some of the Spaniards.
Cortez may have already lost control to the veteran captains in the expedition, and those captains may have then lost control to their Tlaxcalteca allies, who vastly outnumbered the Spanish and obviously, knew what the fuck was going on. Either the Spanish were scared and handed power over willingly, or they were just totally and absolutely politically outmaneuvered by Xicotenga. The Spanish are at this point numbering only 5% of the total expedition, between the Totonac, African slaves, Taino slaves, and the massive Tlaxcalteca contingent, which made up the vast majority of this, the world's worst blunt rotation. Regardless, we're approaching the thing. We've covered a lot of ground, and I think before we reach the thing, we need to talk about something. This is the part of the story of glorious conquest, where humans start being fed into a wood chipper. And I need to ask you to do something difficult. I need you to look up and see what's coming out of the other side of the wood chipper.
God.
The history of the world is but the biography of great men. Thomas Carlyle.
History can be perceived through many different lenses, one of which, known as great man theory, posits that great men from history are born great and end up shaping history, as opposed to history shaping them. As you could imagine, this used to be a popular idea, but is now considered a childish and outright incorrect way to engage with history. I've observed a new theory spread among, bug people and adherents to their worldview, terrible man theory. If you'd like to know what a bug person is, check out this link, then come right back, or I'll find you. The history
I'll
of
watch
the
that
world
one
is but the
before the next
biography
one.
of terrible men. This is just as stupid, and you need to stop, because it's actually an incredibly dangerous worldview. I would argue, nearly as dangerous as great man theory,
Yes.
which obviously is like fucking,
This is what happens. The pendulum swings. Why I preach fence sitting. Fence sitting is essentially trying to sort out the world through a non-radical lens, and it's like, yes, there was the great man theory, not the best way of conducting historical narrative. Yes, but the answer isn't to swing to the opposite side and be like, well, if they're not so great, they're actually terrible. It's like, yeah, every person is it's some amount of good and bad for the most part, and they kind of equal out. I'm looking forward to seeing what he really thinks is the way to approach history. But I would say, for the most part, it's like it's complicated, and you can't really create a true narrative of it. And the further you try, the more complicated and convoluted it gets, and you're still going to have to cut corners and sand off the edges, and to omit things. It's like that. So it's like the great men, there are. I do kind of believe that there are great men, but it's not like they are born and then they shape history. It's like, no, they're born and the world shapes them and turns them into something, and then they are subject to history until they start making history. Is probably the way I would state it. And even then, they're a part of a bigger collective. It is this kind of weird push and pull of individualism and collectivism that I think we are seeing and debating. But at the end of the day, it is both. You might wake up an individual, you might go to sleep an individual, but you walk out into the world and you're part of a collective. Anyways, let's get further into this.
Right-wing creep, catnip. The one thing I get from my perspective, woeful it may be, is I am obsessed with context. The sticks and carrots of a civilization's culture, economics, and politics. Julius Caesar killed 1/3 of the population of Gaul and enslaved another.
That Gaul, that statue of the Gaul, I saw that a few years ago, and I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but never before had I seen a portrait or a statue of somebody or something and thought, I might be related to them. I felt like when I looked at the portrait of the Gaul, I saw myself, I saw my dad, I saw my brothers. So just saying. I guess I maybe have Gaul origins, but then again, who's know if that's even what a Gaul looked like? That could have been, it was a statue, created, in a studio most likely or something like that. It could have been a Roman posing as the Gaul or Greek or something like that. But yeah, the Gaul, pretty cool.
And honestly, he probably didn't. He just said that he did. He wrote a book where he bragged about it. Because Rome's political, economic, and social environment rewarded military conquerors. It was the surest method towards political success, riches, and social status. Julius Caesar did not make Rome. Rome made Caesar. He would have been the best goddamned used car salesman in the greater Toronto area if he was born today to a lower middle class family in Canada. Because Julius Caesar, well, I have heard it said by honorable men that he was quite ambitious. Ambitious men and women are born every day. The human desire for status is universal. What is not universal is how you achieve that status.
Yes.
Do you want to spread the glory of Rome? To reclaim the Holy Land? To meet the production quotas of the 5-year plan in only 4 years? To be an Instagram influencer? You don't actually want those things. You just want money, acclaim, power, and respect. And the society you're in told you that's how you get those things. Do you refuse to be productive and clever? Have you totally rejected the virtues of your civilization and instead live under a bridge, a shameful outcast refusing to play the game whose rules were set before your birth? If so, that does make sense. You're my primary demographic. But if you're anything but a homeless schizo under a bridge, you want to be celebrated, you want to be important, and you want money. So did they.
Conquistadors were often younger sons or younger sons of younger sons, forced by the size of their parents' families to find a career in order to live, and had been obliged to choose between the church, the sea, or the court. They were men driven by several motives: to become rich, to become famous, and to extend the dominions of Christianity.
To be a good little conquistador was to be eventually rewarded with an encomienda. Unfortunately, I don't know what that is. Computer, what is that?
The encomienda system was a system that's purpose was nominally to teach the natives about Christianity and European civilization, while they also helped work a conquistador's land. In practice, however, it was a system of slavery necessary to fully exploit the economic potential of these new lands.
Yeah.
As the native population collapsed over the decades due to a combination of brutality, disease, and being worked to death, African slaves would be brought in to replace them. Indians were argued to be subhuman so as to justify this abhorrent treatment in the same way Africans later would be.
This was the path to success for these men, so they took it. Of course, there were dissenting Spanish voices. As the flow of blood from the New World grew from a trickle to a torrent, many men would decry these actions as evil, most famously Bartolomé de las Casas, a man who we will discuss in detail later.
That's something else to remember. Remember the times that we live in now, or even 80, not even like the 80s or something like that. But basically, think about all the nuance and all the opposition, or at the very least, angry posting about our current leadership or the leadership before. And just remember that in enough time, the people will assume that we were all in favor, one way or the other, of what we have. The nuance is gone. You as an American is going to be, condensed into one idea. An American of first it's going to be an American of the 2020s, the 2010s, whatever. And then eventually it'll become an American of the early century. And then it'll just become an American of the century. And only upon further inspection will people actually understand the more nuance and, how we were all different. Now, granted, maybe the digital era might change that and make us and preserve our nuances for people to examine. But I don't think it's going that way, guys. I think that these posts that we were making, they're not standing the test of time.
Has made his choices, and he should be judged for them, and rest assured we will. But the deeper you look, the more apparent it becomes that Cortez wasn't just a product of his time. He was merely a tool in a grander system of exploitation, used by Velázquez, used by the other captains, used even by the Tlaxcalteca, and particularly used by the crown itself. The problem is not the actions of Cortez. The problem is that his actions were handsomely rewarded with power and wealth and acclaim. If Cortez didn't do these things, Velázquez, the captains, the crown, well, they would have found someone who would. The problem isn't that a CEO is greedy. It's that a CEO's job is to be greedy.
Yes.
And the job pays handsomely in respect, influence, and cold hard cash. If you're the CEO of Nike and you refuse to outsource and use sweatshop labor to make your new gay pride Nikes, then Nike's board of directors and shareholders will just find someone who will. Your job is to use sweatshop labor to make the gay pride Nikes.
Yeah.
This is why bug people don't like context. It is not that context spares Cortez from judgment, as they would argue it does. It's that it puts the spotlight on the bug people. I'm not concerned with the matter of Cortez's mortal soul. I'm concerned with the conditions that make having a soul a liability. There's an alternative reality where Diego Velázquez is the man people think of when they think of Spanish atrocities. These men were fighting over the privilege to do this shit. The system needed monsters to work, so they paid men handsomely to be monsters. Beyond that, they were inspired to be monsters. The Tale of Amadis was an Iberian story that, to oversimplify, was essentially an Iberian King Arthur story about a valiant and chaste and strong knight in a mythical kingdom. It was actually incredibly popular among conquistadors, and when the thing happens, Bernal Diaz even name drops it. You know how all the bug people and those that listen to them talk about Ukraine like it's the Avengers and Russia like they're Thanos?
Yeah.
That's not new. I am sorry.
That's maybe the biggest problem with, like, I love me a good narrative. We need stories to succeed, but it really makes it to where people can simplify good versus evil, and they can get rid of nuances and larger webs that must be, for us to maintain civility or sanity, culturally must be maintained and acknowledged.
Future students will have to learn about the goddamn Marvel Cinematic Universe in school in order to truly grasp the late-stage American Republic. You did this. I blame you. The stories you tell people provide the framework through which they perceive the world. The die is cast is a line from a Greek play. Thank God, Caesar did not watch Marvel movies. Wow, a point of no return. A gamble of unprecedented stakes. Do you have anything to say on it, Caesar? So that just happened. Wow. So iconic.
The tale of
Maybe we could say that Dan Harmon has caused immense amount of damage by teaching more people how to tell a story. He taught me.
Amadis, the most successful printed book of the early 16th century in Spain, though written far earlier, accompanied conquistadors as much as did prayer books and books of hours.
Remember when Iron Man came out and it was about the greed of arms manufacturers and American imperialism? That was weird. I sure am glad that now superheroes just punch CGI space monsters in a heckin' wholesome and inclusive way. The stories we tell to children inspire their actions as adults, and their actions as adults are either rewarded or punished by the society they exist within. Why did King Charles look the other way for Cortez when he was so obviously breaking every law and motivated by avarice rather than loyalty to God and country? He needed money and access to rich lands, and after 30 years of exploitation, the Caribbean was a wasteland.
Everywhere in the Caribbean, the Indian population declined almost to nothing in the course of 2 generations. The Spanish Caribbean in 1518 thus seemed a ruined place.
Apocalypse.
The Indians washed for gold and died young, while the Spanish fed livestock, seduced the native women, and read romances. The crown seemed uninterested, except where profit could be obtained to finance the royal adventures in Italy. The crown allowed the tropical autocrats a free rein, provided that they at home could enjoy bizarre titles indicating Cuban or Puerto Rican responsibilities, and provided that products were sent home which could be turned into money, especially gold.
But
Going back about erasing a generation or erasing entire people within generations, and that's what systemic genocide, it seems, was the soup du jour, if you will. Now granted, there's a lot to be said that the disease alone did a lot of the work that they brought with them, but if you take people's women and breed with them and make them basically off limits for the culture to produce children with, you're going to eradicate an entire way of being very quickly. Like once these new children are yours and indoctrinated into your culture, and if you do that across the entirety of a people's, it's just a matter of time. That's the scary thing. It's not, some genocides happen in years. It can be maybe days, maybe a day, a truly brutal day. And some genocides happen over the course of generations, slowly but surely. If I remember correctly, I don't understand the math on this, but from what I understand, the way that the American government defines being a Native American makes it to where eventually Native Americans will no longer exist, because it has to do with percentage of heritage or something like that. And on a long enough timeline, nobody will have that percentage of heritage. And thus legally, Native Americans' population will be 0 and gone. I don't know about culturally though. But then again, I'm sure some people still proclaim to be Aztec, maybe even try to keep some idea of the Aztec culture alive, whatever survived to this point.
people like to focus on lay evil racism because they don't want you to question the system you exist within, what it has compelled you to be, and what sort of person our system rewards. Spanish colonization was a business that's doing just swell to this day. The business of leveraging military might to enforce economic conditions which enrich the invaders. And it should all be discussed on that basis and from that perspective.
Yes.
Cortez would be condemned categorically for his atrocities by the crown several months after his death, when the money was made and it no longer mattered. You think Cortez was a piece of...
What, did they send him to hell too? Did the Pope decree that he's excommunicated?
shit? Congrats. You're about 5 centuries late with your hot take, bug person. Everyone knew he was a monster. Nobody cared he was a monster. The gold flowed. Cortez was a dime a dozen. He was a conquistador. He was one among many, and they were just about all the same. They were men inspired by both the stories of great heroes and their belief in a particularly militant sect of Christianity forged by centuries of conflict with Muslims, and these stories and beliefs would morally justify any action, no matter how obviously evil it was, to the public and the crown. These men were rewarded for their actions with not just plunder, but slaves to work the land they'd taken. And any atrocities committed were ignored by the government, which granted these lands and slaves, because that government was given 1/5 of all the plunder found, and besides the first 2 expeditions of Columbus, the crown didn't need to spend a cent to get this gold. Conquistadors were investors. They invested in arms, armor, and ships, with the belief they'd find enough plunder or enslave enough natives to make it worth it. It's a hell of a racket. I wish I'd thought of it. Could have.
Yeah, it sounds like Cortez was just in the lost, the lost leader phase. He was just like part of the early expedition to sow the seeds in order to really, crack the create the system that they needed. He just was there to do the little atrocities and then create, to make the room for the bigger atrocities.
Al Capone a few things with this one, and the worst part is,
Cortez was virtually deified, recognizable as a legendary icon, not as a credible historical human being.
making him a villain is nearly as bad as making him a hero.
Yeah.
Regardless of whether or not it's bad or not, though, it's certainly wrong. When you pull back the curtains of Cortez, the Great and Powerful, you see the men around him who influenced him, the Spanish legal system which looked the other way, the history which shaped him, the stories which inspired him, and the economics that enriched him. Context matters because you should interrogate your context. How have the gears of civilization ground you? What has the world compelled you to be? Dunking on dead men is the pastime of bug people, and it does nothing for anyone other than their ability to sleep at night. And maybe they should try sleepy time tea instead. That fucking bear's a drug dealer, let me tell ya. Behind every slave in history is an investor looking for profit. Thank you for watching. I can't begin to tell you how overwhelming this project has been, and we're only about 2/3 of the way done. But now, finally, we're at the meeting. We came to a broad causeway and continued our march, and when we saw all those cities and villages built in the water and that straight and level causeway leading to Mexico, we were astounded. These great towns and temples and buildings rising from the water, all made of stone, seemed like an enchanted vision from the tale of Amadis. Who could now count the multitude of men, women, and boys in the streets, on the rooftops, and in canoes on the waterways, who had come out to see us? So, with luck on our side, we boldly entered the city of Tenochtitlan on the 8th of November, in the year of our Lord, 1519.
Oh no. Wow, wasn't that something? That I cannot wait to watch the next installment. I'm not sure. I have work this weekend, so maybe not until early next week. I'm going to try to get this out as soon as possible, so hopefully these words are coming to you maybe on Saturday the 3rd. Anyways, but I do think I'm going to do a quick watch of the Bug Person video before I watch the second installment. Maybe that'll just be at the beginning, depending on how long that Bug Person video is. I'll try to watch them back to back. But thank you so much for joining me today here at Jolie's. I invite you to come and sit upon the fence and look at history with a level, like I guess a level view, and be looking down and seeing the entire context of it instead of looking up and seeing just the great men or the big events and trying to work out what exactly they meant from that perspective. DJ Peach Cobbler is he probably will hate me for saying this, but I believe he has the fence-sitting philosophy. So, thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe to this channel. This video, if you are watching this video, you gotta know another history nerd. If you don't know another history nerd, you need to make some friends. And you know how you make friends? By sharing this video with them. Please do that. Also, I guess, as always, please buy my game. I'm thinking about starting up, maybe a Discord for the fence sitters, so we can all get together. Maybe y'all can tell me which videos you want me to watch. But those are just thoughts as of right now. I'll let you know when they've taken action. And otherwise, please enjoy yourself. For the most part, I have, so suffice to say, I am, for some reason, I can't see the record, so I'm going to go and check that. Great. Edit point. Okay, it's recording. All right. This is such a long video. I'm so paranoid that something's going to go wrong. Okay, but we're almost at the end, guys. All right, about 10 minutes left.